What up, dudes? Welcome back to the Video Game Sidequest, a subsection of our podcast where we talk about something that maybe didn't require a full episode or maybe possibly even a question from you guys, which we would like to answer here.
Today's all about our feet.
Yeah,
It's just going to be close-ups of our feet.
those are feet. Tarantino's going
Uh,
to finally sub to our podcast. Uh,
he's already here. That's
yeah,
what he's been taking all my tips, all
nice.
all my
Well,
story tips. That's
we're
that's
gonna
all
do a
me, guy.
double thing today. We're gonna answer a question from you guys, and we're gonna talk about kind of a very serious subject. But yeah, so we're
So
gonna kind of do it.
Jamesster 445 asks, "I would love a side quest about why Matt hates Golden Sun," and it's a pretty good question because I actually don't know why you hate Golden. I wouldn't even say you hate Golden Sun though. You just like to make jokes about it. Do you viscerally
Is
hate
that
it?
the full question? No,
No.
there was
So
more
he
to that.
He says, I would love a side quest about why Matt hates Golden Sun. I think it's funny whether it's his stream, Max's stream, or even Easy Ally on Easy Allies. If Simmons gets the chance to remind everyone that Golden Sun is a dead franchise, he will. And I am curious as to why.
Okay, first of all, I do not hate Golden Sun.
You love it.
First of all, I actually like Golden Sun. Let me give you a little history here. Golden Sun, made by Camelot Software Planning, used to be Sonic Software Planning. They made one of my favorite games of all time. You can go back to our Yo Video Game podcast episode where our top 10 games of all time. Shining Force 3 is there. This is like the RPG
Oh, they're the
they
same people
made.
that made
Yeah,
Shining Force. Cool.
this is the RPG they made after Shining Force 3, okay? I like Golden Sun. In fact, I tried to import Golden Sun when it first came out, and it just never showed up. Luckily, it was a COD, and I didn't have to pay anything, which is
Nice.
all fine by me, I guess. I didn't get it; it was bummed, but I was all in on this. That was the game that got me hyped for the Game Boy Advance when they first revealed the Game Boy Advance. I was like, they had
The
Mario Kart
taco.
and they had Mario Kart Super Circuit, and they had some other stuff, and I'm like, I saw Golden Sun, I'm like, I want that. Um, However, that being said, I will say that upon its release, it's a cool RPG. It's very old school. I love the fact that it's all about getting these cool psi abilities that let you solve puzzles in the overworld. So it gives a little more to do on in the dungeons and towns than just the usual go to the shop, get upgrades, go to dungeon, yada
Right.
yada, rinse repeat, right? However, other than that, it's okay otherwise. It doesn't stand out. A lot of people got really addicted and into it because you got to remember the timing of this thing. This came out in 2001 or 2, and it for the most part was like the first RPG a lot of young Nintendo fans had ever played. Because when the Super NES died and the N64 came out, there was no RPGs really on the N64. There was
Hmm.
Quest 64 and Aiden Chronicles. We can make that joke. Ha ha ha.
That's fair.
Paper Mario, which Paper Mario came out, by the way, in 2001.
Yeah, I was
Like
gonna
at,
say I was
at
gonna
the
say Paper Mario, but
very end of the, so it had been forever since an actual honest to god RPG had showed up. There was some re-releases on the Game Boy Color, but for the most part, like, the RPG genre was pretty much went into a 5-year coma on Nintendo products in
hmm,
general. Like, and I'm talking about, like, Nintendo Power didn't have anything to cover. There wasn't anything to really talk about. It just, again, it would just, so for a lot of people, this was their introduction to an RPG, beyond Pokemon. And I see why it really stuck because, much like there's a first fuck syndrome with Final Fantasy. I
mm,
think that's true of RPGs in general. Your first real RPG you kind of become really attached to it, and I think people get really attached to Golden Sun. That's not to say Golden Sun is bad. It's good, right? Like, it's like, possibly, like, I'd go so far to say it's like an 8 out of 10 or something like that, right?
8 out of 10 is pretty high
It's
praise.
pretty good. It's very good, and it had
Strong
a follow
seven out
up,
of five energy.
right? And it had an immediate follow up with the Lost Age, which was kind of like, okay, what are these four characters doing? What these four characters are doing during the first game? So it was a lot like Shining Force in that way, and then it went into like this big deep coma. The series did, and then came back later at the end of the DS's life with Golden Sun Dark Dawn, which was like a big time skip game, which also ended on a cliffhanger, and that kind of sucks. The reason I almost kind of keep bringing it up is more. it's not that, "Oh, I hate this franchise." It's more dig at Nintendo because, like, Nintendo basically just let it die. Like, on the one hand, you could say, well, they gave them a chance with the Dark Dawn on the DS, which really, really undersold. Like, it was just too much time had passed, and, like, there were so many other RPGs on the DS. Like when Golden Sun came out on the Game Boy Advance, it was like an early game and a showpiece game, and it didn't have competition, right?
Hmm.
Whereas when you come in at the end of the DS's life, there's a shit ton of RPGs on the DS, big RPGs, full remakes of Final Fantasy 3 and 4. So it just kind of sadly just kind of got ignored. Um, but it's more just sort of like a dig at sort of Nintendo in a way where it's like you just kind of let this franchise die. And why did it die? It was because Camelot is about 40, 45 people work there. And
It's still
they
going.
yeah, and they make Mario Golf and they make Mario Tennis. And they kind of just rotate between golf and tennis, golf and tennis, golf and tennis. They don't really and making games nowadays
Huge
is a very
endeavor. Yeah.
complicated process, right? It takes so much time and effort and work. And there is no more portable to, like, just make like a smaller, less intense resource intensive portable game. Like the Switch is the bottom of the barrel as far as hardware goes. And even then you can't really get away. I think Golden Suns would actually be fine if a Golden Sun 4 came out and it just looked like the original Game Boy Advance game, like sprite work. I think they'd actually be cool with that. I don't
Really,
think anyone would have a
even on the
problem.
Switch.
Yeah, I don't think anyone would have a problem with it. I
Hmm.
wouldn't really have a problem with it either, but I understand why, because it's like they make a Mario Golf and Tennis game which sells 2 to 4 million copies. Um, and then they got to bounce between those two because that's all. And you can't when you're 45 people, strong, you don't have the ability to have multiple projects going on at once. You just don't.
Right.
Not in today's day and age. So they kind of got to go with what's bringing them cheddar. And Nintendo, for their part, is like, why would they bother with a Golden Sun game? They have other RPGs and they have other big RPGs, and their Mario Tennis and golf games sell well and fill voids in the release schedule. I don't see why Nintendo would even want to fund the Golden Sun game, but I think they should. This is more a case of like
Yeah, I think it would be a good. It's a good time to bring up an old franchise.
I think if Nintendo really was the good guy here, that a lot of people really think they are, and they're not, they would buy Camelot. They would then influx Camelot with more developers, and then they would tell Camelot, "Hey, have a Golden Sun team, and we're gonna and a Mario Golf and Tennis team."
Well, if they gave a shit about taking a break from Zelda, Golden Sun is an opportunity to sort of take a break from Zelda in terms of your adventure or RPG.
Yeah, I mean it's turn based, but it's
Oh, yeah, but it
it's
doesn't have to be anymore. It
true.
was turn-based 20 years
It could
ago.
be a lot more physics, real time based with
Yeah,
stuff. But either way, like the argument would probably be like, well, we have Paper Mario, we have Fire Emblem, and we have Xenoblade. Why do
right.
we need to? I'm like, well, why not? Like,
Because I want it, daddy.
a wide net catches more fish.
Right.
like, like it's one of those things. But like again, then Nintendo's like, but that's spending money. I'm like,
Right,
you
and they
make
have bigger problems right now, though, where it's like they need to figure out how to keep the Switch from dying.
Yeah,
They need
because
to get
well, I
that
mean, they're
ship.
doing well. They had their financial reports come out, and I'm like, it's down, obviously.
Mhm.
And I would argue that like you probably should be aware that you're reaching the cap of people will say like, no way, they're not reaching the cap. I'm
The
like,
Switch is it's getting to
like
the point where
console sale like game sales are pretty damn good still, but like the console sales are just kind of like one. I would say we've passed the peak,
yeah,
and
they're flattening out.
it's just going to decline from this point forward because there's no one left to sell to. There's all 114 million switches.
Yeah.
There's no one left to sell to,
Yeah, and
basically.
what it's now a 5-year-old console?
Yeah, it's going to be 6 soon in March. So
Yeah, so, they could do a new one. They could move on.
yeah, so the point, I don't hate Golden Sun, but I kind of just like it's almost like I want to remind you all that Nintendo just let this franchise fucking die because
It
it's not
reminds
Camelot
me
that did this. This is Nintendo just let it fucking die. Um,
it sorta reminds me a little bit of your hatred for Kingdom Hearts. You were a Kingdom Hearts fan,
yeah,
and then one day you woke up and you're like, "God damn Kingdom Hearts."
this
Just
game
one day you
sucks.
realize. All right, let's finish up the episode with some serious talk because there was controversy and we didn't
Yeah.
want to do a full episode on it.
Yeah, so we wanted to talk about this because, like, I know we covered all the pretty serious stuff with Bayonetta 3, and I feel like it'd be weird for us to just not do this, although, we're not as affected due to the, you know, pasty complexion. Um,
What do you mean?
but I think we just want to take a sort of like level-headed approach at this that we can. In an interview with IGN, and here's the thing I want to get out of the way. These interviews are done with official translators. They are not done in a vacuum. This isn't just like a conversation they had on fucking Discord
Yeah, so somebody
and then
could have
just had it
told them.
published. Like,
Mm,
this was like there were company reps were absolutely present when this went down. This is not some weird off the cuff remark. But anyways, let's just jump right into what is it that got. So IGN said, in regards to diversity in the game, can we expect to see black characters in Final Fantasy 16 or people of color, non-white characters in general? To clarify a bit more, there's been discussion around the trailers to date featuring mostly white characters, and I wanted to get clarity on whether we can expect the final game to be more diverse. Naoki Yoshida, YoshiP, the producer, I'm going to read you his full response because I feel it's fair. This is a difficult question, but not one that was unexpected. So he knew this was coming, not one that's unexpected. Seeing as diversity in entertainment media has become a much discussed topic as of late, the answer I have, however, may end up being disappointing to some depending on individual expectations. Our design concept from the early stages of development has always heavily featured medieval Europe, incorporating historical, cultural, political, and anthropological standards that were prevalent at the time. When deciding on a setting that was best suited to the story we wanted to tell, the story of a land beset by the Blight, we felt that rather than create something on a global scale, it was necessary to limit the scope to a single landmass, one geographically and culturally isolated from the rest of the world in an age without airplanes, television, or telephones, Japan, even though it's medieval Europe.
Japan in the 90s.
due, due to the underlying geographical, technological, and geopolitical constraints of this setting, Valisthea was never going to realistically be as diverse as, say, a modern day Earth, or even Final Fantasy XIV that has an entire planet and moon worth of nations, races, and cultures at its disposal.
If he
The
stopped there,
the isolated nature of this realm, however, does end up playing a large part in the story and is one of the reasons Valisthea's fate is tied to the rest of the world. Ultimately, we felt that while incorporating ethnic diversity into Valencia was important, an over incorporation into this single corner of a much larger world could end up causing a violation of those narrative boundaries we originally set for ourselves. The story we are telling is fantasy, yes, but it is also rooted in reality. Mm. Conversely, the Final Fantasy series of games have always inherently dealt with conflict and struggle, especially between the empowered and those used and or exploited by those privileged few, a prominent trend in human history. In a game that, by design, allows players to experience that conflict and struggle firsthand through dynamic, realistic battles, it can be challenging to assign distinctive ethnicities to either antagonist or protagonist without triggering audience preconceptions, inviting unwarranted speculation, and ultimately stoking flames of controversy. The best part of pulling inspiration directly from history, however, is that it allows us to revisit and re examine our own past while also allowing us to create something new. In the end, we simply want to focus to be less on the outward appearance of our characters and more on who they are as people. People who are complex and diverse in their natures, backgrounds, beliefs, personalities, and motivations. People whose stories we can resonate with. There is diversity in Valencia, diversity that, while not all encompassing, is synergistic with the setting we've created and is true to the inspirations from which we are drawing. True to the, okay.
huh?
Um, and here's the thing that now there's a lot to unpack here, and we don't really want to go into all of this necessarily. I will say that it's really honestly, it just kind of strikes me as bizarre, and it really kind of like if I wanted to get geopolitical, I would say this strikes me as a very Japanese centric view of the world of like, oh, we have this isolated landmass, yada yada. But also at the same time, we're heavily inspired by medieval Europe.
which
So
was
if you wanted
anything
to
but
take
isolated.
anything anything but isolated, um,
Right.
so if you want to get down to it, no, medieval Europe was not this weird isolated area of corner of the world that didn't see any diversity in its
Yeah, there were
populace.
a
That
lot
that
of white
just
people in Europe,
that's
but
not
medieval Europe,
how that's not how history is. And I think the part where he kind of made a mistake here was really just the couple times, like he said, it's rooted in reality, and we want it's true to the inspirations from which you're drawing. I think that's the part. And here's in the thing I personally and I got I read about this from a Japanese translator, a man who is Japanese and translates for a living from Japanese to English, and he was kind of like, you need to stop coddling Japanese developers every time they say something. This man's 49 years old. He's been making games for a while. Like, he's been traveling the world for a while. He's absolutely aware. Um, I'll say this: I don't think the idea that, like, well, he lives in Japan, he's just not a, he just didn't, he's not aware of cultural diversity. I'm like, that's not true.
that in and of
Um,
itself is sort of ignorant to say.
yeah, it kind of is. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's from Japan. They don't know shit. What? They don't have the internet in Japan. They don't travel or get books.
And here's the thing. I'm like, to me, I'm like, okay, it's a dumb response. It's he tried to be he tried to dance around it as sensitively as he could,
He tried to
but
be
it's
over diplomatic,
he
right?
tried over. That's a
He
good
could
way to
have
say.
just said like, I didn't think about it.
Right, and that
All
my
right.
opinion from the beginning of this has always been like, he should have just I just didn't think about it. We should have. We're sorry. We fucked up. Like, that to me.
He doesn't even have to say that we should have or that he's sorry. He should just say like it just
We just
wasn't a
didn't think
thing,
about it.
didn't
Like,
occur to me because it isn't a thing in Japanese culture. Like they're not concerned about diversity, not like we
right.
are. So that's fair.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think it would have been just more honest. It was just like, we just didn't think about
yeah,
it.
I
Like,
didn't
we
think
just
about it. You don't need to take out an op-ed, dude. You don't
it
need to write
is
a whole.
strikingly weird that there is a country, a nation in Final Fantasy 16 that is in the desert and is heavily, heavily, heavily based on Northern Africa. And yet the people are kind of generally tan, not definitely not necessarily, there's not necessarily people of color or black people. They're just like, they look like
Oh right, yeah.
really tan, you know
No, that's true to the region of Northern Africa. That's totally true.
right. But I mean, like, I'm saying, like, when you see the guy who turns into Titan, he doesn't look like someone from Northern Africa.
Well,
um
all I'm gonna say is like you meet Moroccans and they're just tan dudes.
Right. Well, I think
They're
the
not.
point is, like, it's weird that what I'm kind of really getting at here is that he talks about this as being a very isolated medieval Europe, yet you have a very heavily Moroccan kingdom here. So you're not isolated to, like, say, Norway. Um, it's
Maybe
already kind
he
of weird.
maybe he was like, and this is the Basque Spanish. Maybe that's what he's.
But I think for me, my personal thing is here is like, it's okay to still like and admire Yoshi P, and it's okay to say he gave a shit response. Like,
Yeah.
he gave a wishy-washy, like weird response. He is also the producer of the game. He is the creator of his own narrative. So, like, he kind of keeps going back and forth between, like, we wanted to have this fantasy, but we also wanted to keep it true to reality. And I'm like, bro, it's your world. Like, you could have green and blue and whoever people there. Like, there's nothing stop and there's absolutely nothing stopping you from saying, like, it's a fantasy world. I'm just going to have all kinds of different, ethnic representation in my game, realistic representation, not just green and blue, but like realistic ethnic representation in my game. You know why? Because it's a fantasy world. Like, I'm in control of my narrative. Like, you went out of your way to specifically say, like, it's my world, it's my fantasy narrative. It's rooted in medieval Europe, so I'm specifically not going to have people of color in my game, which I'm like, I don't understand. It almost makes his in a way, it makes the response almost maybe a little bit worse to say,
Yeah.
like, I'm in control of our fantasy world, and I'm specifically choosing not to have ethnic representation in the
I
game. It's
think,
just it's
again, I don't think what he said was racist. I know he's getting that
That's the
shit.
thing, because some people are like, "Oh, he's a racist." I don't necessarily think he is.
Nah, he just didn't think about it, and he came up with some bullshit he thought
I
sounded
think
good.
he just gave a bad response to a fair
Right.
question, but, like, it's just kind of a bad response. And I think it's fine to just be like, "Okay, he's a cool dude." And from what I've seen, it sounds like he's a pretty cool dude for the most part. But I think here was kind of a it was just kind of a fuck up. Like, it was
Yeah.
just kind of like, oh yeah, it was kind of a weird question. What he expected to be that he said, he expected the question to come up, so he knew it would actually happen at some point
I
during
think
development,
someone
which is
must have I think someone on PR was all like, "Hey, man, there's a awful lot of white
yeah,
people in this."
yeah. And again, I don't want, and I think we got to. I want to really stress, because I know how these interviews go between Square
Right.
Enix and media, especially like media like IGN. It wasn't sprung on him. This wasn't like someone like chased him down,
Yeah, this
somewhere
wasn't a
in.
gotcha.
Yeah, is when a guy like chased him down the streets of Japan and like shoved a mic in his face and said, "What do you think about it? We're the black people." It
How dare
wasn't
you?
it wasn't that. Like, he
Right.
knew this question was coming. He even said so at the beginning. Um, but like, does that make the game bad necessarily or wrong? Well, no, but it does make the game probably feel a little bit like, it's a bit of I don't know what the term would be, like a white bread factory. I bet,
Well,
but
I do think that, like, again, it's not like he's unaware of the diversity of the world.
yeah.
Um, it's just I don't know. He could have just been like, "Man, think about it," and it would have been acceptable, right? People would have just been like, "Oh, yeah." I think it's the
Yeah.
fact that he went out of his way to try and like give a very highly academic, but actually, I'm totally right here, bro. Answer.
Yeah.
I don't think it makes him a shithead or anything. He's wrong.
Yeah, it's
He's
just
clearly he is wrong about medieval Europe. Like, I mean, post Crusades especially. But the
yeah, there
fuck.
was and
When did the
there
Golden
was
Horde fight the Teutonic Knights in the east of Europe?
and people like don't, like Northern Africa invaded into Spain. They were actually on a there was a crusade, there was a reverse crusade to take over Europe from Africa, and they
Yeah,
actually got stopped because of the invention of the stirrup in France. Um,
yeah, and then the reason why it's Castilian Spanish in Spain is that uh Castile is who retook Spain.
yeah.
Actually in
It's
kind of a
European history is actually very fascinating and actually multifaceted and multicultural. Honestly, if you want to really get into it, and it wasn't just
I'm
it
blanking on
was
the name of the character. It's like Sir it's a knight who became really, really famous during that time of recapturing Spain.
Mhm.
Um
Yeah, because
God,
they had
what
to push back down across the Strait of Gibraltar.
he was like a giant El Cid.
Elsa, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Read. There's books about him. There's fucking TV shows and movies all about El Cid. Real badass. But that was his time. It was the time he was around. All of Spain was a caliphate.
yeah,
So sort of silly response. If he's talking
yeah.
about like
I think what
the
really buried him
700s, I
was,
guess.
yeah, the burying part was basically trying to say, well, it's based on medieval Europe. I'm like, it's not as it's not Sleeping Beauty, dude.
But also, he's not an expert on medieval Europe. I don't.
Probably not. But again,
That's that's like all the dude bros on the internet who are all like, "What's this European country?" and like getting mad at everyone in the world who doesn't know. Like,
I'm like,
yeah, all
it's
right,
Germany.
point at Rhode Island, asshole. Like, no one knows where the fuck that is. That's
Or
not
Delaware if you want to make it
or
go
Del.
hard mode.
Where's New Hampshire? Which one's North and South Dakota? Fucking find me. Pick Colorado on a map. It's a square. Like I don't know. None of the fucking states are outside of like a few key states. Like everyone knows what Texas looks like. That thing's fucking huge and is
Yeah.
weird shaped. I guess California's pretty distinct, but there's like a whole swath of states that like just looking at their shape on a empty page could be any of 16 states.
Right. Yeah.
Um, anyway,
The thing,
it's not that I want to shit on the guy or anything. It is sort of silly to call him racist because he doesn't know that.
yeah, I think looking at this, I want to look at this very measured. Like, I don't think he is inherently
It's hilarious.
racist, right? I don't think it's is inherently like doomed for the game or anything like that. I'm not saying like, oh, don't buy this game. This guy said this thing. Um, it just it really reminds me, and I know someone else brought this up from Easy Allies. It reminds me a lot of when Enuma gave multiple shitty responses for why Link didn't there wasn't a gender option in Breath of the
Oh
Wild.
yeah.
Why you Link couldn't be a girl. And it's like, I don't think Enuma's necessarily a bad person, although the fact that he, like, on the same day gave 2 completely separate but inane responses or it's a lot. I'd almost say his responses were way worse.
Right.
Um,
Well, and he clearly didn't have a prepared response. He was
yeah,
blindsided by that.
he was a little bit blindsided by that, but it was still kind of like, wow,
Still
that is the
dumb.
dumbest fucking response. Like, this doesn't sound dumb, like what it's dumb, but it sounds like he tried to rationalize it,
Right.
in his
Yeah.
head.
He tried to
And
give what he thought was a good response.
yeah, and Enuma's like this. Enuma just like just word salad, which
Right.
just made him look way worse when it's like, oh, Link can't be a girl because it would upset the balance of the Triforce. What the fuck are you talking about, dude?
Well, Link
What
can't
the
be a girl because girls can't wear green. They don't look good in tunics. Everybody knows that only boys wear leggings
Like, it was
and
almost
riding
that
boots.
bad. That wasn't his response. That was almost that bad.
It's
So yeah, the other thing that I kind of want to like at least address is like if this was coming out of Activision or Ubisoft, or Blizzard or EA, this would just be a log on the or Konami. This would just be a log on the fire. That
right.
is, the public burning of those companies, right? Like you expect it. Like if some producer at Ubisoft said something this fucking inane, um, everyone be like, yeah, fuck Ubisoft. I hate Ubisoft, blah, blah, blah. But like it's coming from this. So people kind of have to do all these mental gymnastics of like, well, he just didn't know he was caught off guard. He was
Right.
he's just trying to be true to the source material. No, he's not. Like it's like you don't have to run to his defense. You can just be like, hey man, that was kind of a shit response, but you
And
know,
move on. Yeah. Uh,
like okay, that was a shit.
Japanophiles.
If anything, like if anything, I would just be like, look, you seem like a cool dude, but let me tell you something here. That's not true to history. Um, I'm not gonna not buy your game. I'm not gonna not be excited for your game, but like, yeah, maybe just think about that next time. And I'm sure he will, because like I'm sure it's gotten back to him. I'm sure Square is like very much aware of the response. This got all around the internet. I'm
A
sure
lot of
Square's
deep sighs, I'm sure.
yeah, a lot of people. So I'm sure it's just kind of like, and I guarantee you when if Yoshi P is in charge of Final Fantasy 17 or any other project outside of 14, and even that we could go into that, but I'm not going to too long anyways. I'm sure he will just absolutely like reconsider his approach and response to this stuff. It can what this can be. It can just be a good learning experience for the development team,
Right.
and for YoshiP. That's what it can be. It doesn't have to be, a public crucifying, of the man, and it doesn't, and it doesn't need to be. He doesn't need to be shielded from any and all blame for saying something dumb. It
Yeah, he's
can,
not Elon Musk.
yeah, we can have a positive learning experience from this. And I think, honestly, I'm actually being optimistic here. I actually think that's what's going to happen. I don't think this is going to affect the sales of the game one way or the other. I think the hyper defenders will still be hyper defenders, and the people who immediately want him dead are just going to always be that way. They're always going to hold it
Right.
against him, right? Like they're like, you should not have a job ever again because you said something dumb in an interview.
And the truth is none of those people are going to buy the game anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're not, if that's all it took,
Well, yeah, but like again, like over half of the people that are screaming about boycotts in any given thing are just people they were never going to buy it anyway. They were
yeah.
they were never going to buy the thing. It's
Yeah, probably not. But I think, like, honestly, I feel like, okay, they're definitely gonna take this into consideration next time. And we'll just it just doesn't like by the next 17 is gonna come out, and there'll probably be plenty of positive representation, and we won't even need to bring it up.
right.
I mean, if anything, I would think it'd be kind of dickish of IGN. Say it says Final Fantasy 17 gets revealed someday, and it definitely has, a wide variety of characters in its cast, right? Was this a response to 16? Shut up. Like, you don't need to like that does not need to be asked, if it comes up. It kind of
They'll fucking
feels
ask it because 'cause they'll think it's their fault. They'll wanna be like, "Well, I'm the guy that asked the question." I
like
fucking hate it when people are like, "I'm just asking questions." Shut
yeah, that
up.
you don't need to that's sort of like a self brag, like self-aggrandizing, like, yeah, was that because of what I
Well,
asked you last time?
it's like when assholes on the internet think that Quentin Tarantino's listening to their writing tips, you know? Those fucking idiots. Anyway, we're out of time. We're out of time. We can't show you any of our feet, and I'm sorry for that, but, maybe next episode. Again, thank you, Jamesster, for your question. Golden Sun is dead and probably will remain dead, but, we always appreciate questions, comments, any questions you have or requests for side quests or even full episodes. Let us know on Patreon. Let us know on YouTube or Twitter or the Discord if Twitter is actually dying. Who knows? And we'll catch you next time, guys.
All right, later, dudes.